Port Harcourt wakes early, but nothing wakes earlier than Mile 1 Market. Before the sky even thinks of turning blue, before roosters crow, before buses roar onto Equerre Road, the market is already alive. Sellers drag open their wooden stalls. Women balance basins of vegetables on their heads. Men unload baskets of live chickens from old trucks. But there is one spot, one single corner, where people gather before dawn. Kunle's roasted chicken stand. No one knows when he arrived in Port Harcourt. Some say 3 years ago, others say 5, but everyone remembers when his chicken first appeared. It was soft, juicy, perfectly seasoned, and somehow always fresh. People swore it tasted different from any chicken they had eaten before, almost too good. By 6 a.m., the line was already stretching past the next 3 stalls. Bankers, mechanics, students from River State University, and even police officers joined the queue. Everyone wanted a piece of Kunle's chicken before their day began. Today was no different. Kunle, tall and dark-skinned, stood behind his grill, turning the chicken with slow, practiced movements. Smoke curled into the air, carrying a smell that made even passing strangers stop. His smile was calm, but his right leg trembled beneath him. He hid it well. Every few minutes, he pressed a hand against the side of his leg, just above the knee, where a cloth was tightly wrapped under his trousers. He winced, just a little, but quickly forced himself to smile again. "Madame, your order is ready," he said softly as he handed a woman her chicken. Mama Kemi, the vegetable seller beside him, watched with narrowed eyes. She had been in Mile 1 Market for 20 years. Her boiled peanuts and fresh greens fed half the neighborhood. But ever since Kunle arrived, customers ignored her stall and rushed to his. She couldn't understand how one man could rise so quickly. Even worse, she had never seen the chickens he bought from suppliers. He claimed he raised them himself somewhere outside town, but no one had ever visited the place. Not even his 2 assistants, Michael and Tunde, knew exactly where he kept the birds. "Kunle," Mama Kemi said as she approached, wiping her hands on her wrapper, "your chickens are too big today. Did you buy from a new farm?" Kunle smiled politely. "No, Mama, same farm, same process." But she kept staring. She saw the way he limped when he moved. She saw how he avoided putting weight on his right leg. She saw the way sweat rolled down his forehead, even though the morning was still cool. Then she noticed something else. When he reached into the cooler to bring out another chicken, she saw a faint stain on his trousers, a dark, round patch near his right thigh, quickly hidden when he pulled his apron down. She frowned. The customers didn't see it. They were too busy licking their lips, waiting for his chicken. A group of bankers even applauded when he flipped one of the chickens with a perfect sizzle. But Mama Kemi saw everything. Across the stall, Emeka, who sold drinks, leaned closer to Sandra, the fruit seller. "Have you noticed his limp is getting worse?" he whispered. Sandra nodded. "He looks tired, too tired." But despite the pain, Kunle kept grilling. He kept smiling. He kept serving. Because he had no choice. Not with the secret he carried in his leg. And the instructions he could never stop following. And that was the morning Port Harcourt began to sense that something about the chicken seller was not ordinary. Every morning in Surulere, people rushed out of their homes before the sun fully rose, eager to buy Kunle's roasted chicken. His stall was already famous after only a few months. The smoke from his charcoal grill always drifted softly above the street, carrying a smell that made even the most disciplined workers forget their diets. His customers, office staff, mechanics, bank tellers, delivery riders, and market women, often joked that he had some secret seasoning no one else in Lagos possessed. But this morning was different. When Kunle stepped out from behind his stall, the people closest to him paused. His walk was uneven, slow, and heavy. He dragged his right leg as though an invisible weight was tied to it. He tried to hide it with a fake smile,
but the limp was too obvious. Even from a distance, it looked painful. "Kunle, are you all right?" Ada, a regular customer, asked as she handed him money. He laughed it off and said it was nothing, just tiredness from standing for long hours. But Ada noticed his hand. He kept gripping the side of his right thigh like someone guarding a deep injury. His knuckles were tight, almost white. Behind the stall, he moved slower than usual. It took him longer to bend, longer to lift the heavy roasting tray, and longer to turn the chickens on the grill. Sweat ran down his forehead and soaked the collar of his shirt, even though the weather wasn't particularly hot yet. Every step sent a sharp discomfort across his face, but he forced himself to act normal. What made everyone even more confused was how his chickens remained exactly the same: large, unbelievably soft, and perfectly shaped. People whispered among themselves, "How does he get chicken this soft every day? He barely buys feed at the market. His birds grow like they are made of magic." No matter how his limp worsened, his chickens stayed perfect. They looked cleaner, bigger, and tender than those sold by other poultry sellers who fed their birds with expensive products. Even Emeka, who owned a poultry farm in Ogun State, once came to inspect one of Kunle's birds. He held the chicken, pressed its skin, stretched out the wings, and shook his head in disbelief. No natural chicken grew like that in such a short time. Something didn't add up. Still, Kunle acted like everything was fine. But the strangest part wasn't the limp, it was the smell. At first it was faint, like damp cloth that hadn't dried well, but every day the scent got stronger and more unpleasant. It clung to Kunle's clothes, followed him when he moved, and lingered even after he left a space. People could smell it when he passed by, even before he reached them. Some customers turned aside slightly when he walked close, trying to breathe through their mouths so he wouldn't notice their discomfort. Yet his chickens smelled perfect, fresh, seasoned, clean. The aroma from his grill was still the best on the street, tempting enough to distract customers from the foul scent coming from him. Kunle noticed their reactions, but he pretended nothing was wrong. Every time someone sniffed or frowned, he simply adjusted the cloth wrapped around his right leg under his long trousers. Sometimes he winced badly, pressing the area as though something was burning inside, but he refused to sit down or rest. He kept selling. He kept smiling. He kept limping. People began to talk, quietly at first, then openly. "Something is not right with him," a man told Sandra while buying chicken. "That smell? It is not normal." Sandra nodded. "And the limp keeps getting worse every day." By late afternoon, when the sun turned golden over the rooftops of Surulere, Kunle's limp had become almost unbearable. He leaned on the edge of his stall for support. Every movement felt like a blade was slicing through his leg. But he never stopped grilling. What no one knew was this. Under that cloth wrapped around his thigh, the wound Babatunde gave him months earlier in Lagos was changing. It pulsed, it opened, it released something he could no longer control. And each time it did, the chickens in his cage behind the stall grew bigger, softer, and more perfect. The day ended with Kunle locking up his stall and dragging himself home through the dim streetlights. The smell followed him like a shadow. Something dark was happening to him, and he knew it was only the beginning.
By the next week, Kunle's limp had become part of the morning routine in Surulere market. People noticed it the moment they arrived. They whispered about it when they queued. They talked about it even after buying his famous roasted chicken. But the limp was not the only thing stirring curiosity. His sudden wealth had become a louder topic. One afternoon, while the sun was high and the market buzzed with Lagos noise, Emeka, the poultry farmer from Ogun State, stood near the food stall watching Kunle serve customers. He folded his arms, frowning. "That man's story does not balance," Emeka said quietly. Sandra, who sold fresh vegetables beside him, looked up from arranging her tomatoes. "What do you mean?" "Last month, he was renting a one-room. Now he has moved into a two-bedroom apartment behind the bank. He bought new furniture. He even paid someone to repaint the front of his store." Sandra raised an eyebrow. Maybe business is really good. But how? Emeka insisted. He doesn't buy feed. He doesn't buy new birds. He never works with any farm. Yet, every morning his chickens look brand new, big, soft, and perfect. Adobe, who sold soft drinks and snacks 2 stalls away, overheard them. Emeka, are you saying something strange is happening? I am not saying anything. I am only observing. But people in the market did not need a full statement to start talking. A single sentence was enough to spark a storm. Within hours, the gossip spread like wind. Some sellers believed Kunle had joined a secret business group in Lagos before moving to Surulere. Others whispered that a politician was secretly supporting him. A few insisted he was working for a hidden company experimenting with new chicken breeds. But the loudest voice belonged to Mama Kemi. She ran the oldest roasting stall in the area, a small corner spot her late husband left her 20 years earlier. Her chickens were good, but not extraordinary. Her sales had dropped sharply since Kunle arrived, and every lost customer felt like a personal insult. Mama Kemi watched Kunle with a mixture of anger and curiosity. Every day, she stood with her hands on her hips, her wrapper tied firmly around her waist, staring at his stall, as though she could discover his secret through pure suspicion. Look at him, she muttered to Adobe one morning, dragging that leg like something inside wants to come out, yet selling chicken like he's feeding angels. Adobe tried to laugh, but Mama Kemi wasn't joking. She moved closer, lowering her voice. Sandra said he moved into a new house. Did you see the way he dressed today? That shirt is not cheapo. Maybe he saved, Adobe offered. Mama Kemi hissed sharply, not in anger, but in disbelief. Saved? From chicken? In Lagos? My sister, leave that thing. Something else is happening. Later that afternoon, she gathered 3 other women at her stall. They pretended to be sorting pepper, but all their attention was on Kunle. See the way he's limping, like he's carrying something heavy inside that leg. And that smell, another added. It is getting worse. But customers still come, Mama Kemi said bitterly. Every day. In fact, more people come now, even the bankers from the next street. The women nodded. People loved his chicken too much to be discouraged. That made Mama Kemi even more determined. She spent the next few days watching Kunle closely. When he arrived, how he arranged his stall, where he kept his cage of chickens, who he spoke to, and when he left. She wrote mental notes of everything. One evening, she walked to Emeka's stall. Emeka, you know about poultry. You say his chickens are not normal. So what do you think? Emeka hesitated. I don't know, but I want to know. Yes, Mama Kemi said, eyes shining with ambition. We must find out his secret, before the whole market loses business, before he becomes the only seller left. Ada, who was passing by, stopped when she heard the words. Are you people planning something? We are planning to understand, Mama Kemi replied innocently. Is that a crime? Ada folded her hands. Please be careful. Riches can come from strange places. Exactly, Mama Kemi whispered, and I would discover which strange place his own is coming from. That night, as the market lights dimmed and Kunle dragged his wounded leg home, the gossip reached every corner of Surulere. Everyone was watching. Everyone was wondering. And one person, Mama Kemi, was ready to risk anything to uncover the truth.
Long before Surulere Market knew the name Kunle, before the roasted chicken stall, before the strange limp and the growing gossip, he was just another young man struggling to survive in the heart of Lagos. Years earlier, Kunle worked at a spare parts shop in Ladipo Market, one of the busiest places in the city. The shop belonged to Chief Olowu, a wealthy car dealer known for his bold personality, loud laughter, and expensive taste. Chief Olowu drove a new car every 6 months and wore perfumes so strong that people could smell him before they saw him. Kunle, meanwhile, lived in a cramped one-room apartment shared with 2 other young men. He woke up before dawn, squeezed into an overcrowded bus, and arrived at the shop long before Chief Olowu appeared. He swept the floor, arranged the spare parts, polished the counters, and served customers, yet his salary could barely feed him for a week. Every day he watched rich men stride into the shop, men in crisp shirts, polished shoes, gold wristwatches, and car keys that jingled like tiny symbols of success. Some owned multiple cars. Some owned houses in Lekki, Ikoyi, or Victoria Island. Some talked loudly about business deals worth millions, while Kunle quietly waited for them to finish so he could package their items. He listened to their conversations with envy tightening his chest. They laughed easily. They spent money without thinking. They never checked prices. They never worried about rent or food or tomorrow. They lived in a different world. And Kunle wanted that world. He wanted to breathe without the fear of poverty sitting on his neck. He wanted to stop waking up at 4 a.m. just to catch a crowded bus. He wanted to eat food that wasn't the cheapest option on the menu. He wanted to stand tall like the wealthy men who walked into the shop with confidence and left without looking back. Sometimes, during slow hours, he stared at the rows of engines, gearboxes, and metal parts and wondered how long his life would stay the same. One day, after a long, frustrating morning, he sat behind the shop quietly cleaning a set of bolts when Chief Olowu walked in laughing loudly with a friend. The two men spoke about buying land in Abuja and building apartments for rent. Kunle listened, pretending not to hear, but the words stuck in his mind. Land, apartments, millions. He didn't even have savings. Later that day, a rich customer arrived, a tall businessman with a heavy gold chain. He bought an expensive car part without blinking. As Kunle wrapped the item, the man's phone rang. Kunle overheard the conversation. "Transfer 7 million now. Yes, today. I don't want delays." 7 million, just like that. As the man walked out, Kunle felt something burn inside him, a mixture of envy and desperation. That night, when the shop closed, Kunle sat on the low pavement outside, staring at the stream of headlights along the expressway. Lagos looked beautiful from where he sat, glowing under the streetlights, but the beauty felt far away, unreachable. He was tired of working endlessly without moving forward. He was tired of being invisible. He was tired of dreaming of wealth he couldn't touch. The next morning, Kunle entered the shop earlier than usual. Chief Olowu arrived shortly after, wearing a new designer shirt. Kunle watched the man with new eyes filled with a hunger for change. As soon as the moment felt right, he approached him. "Chief," he said quietly, "I want to know something." Chief Olowu looked up surprised. "What is it?" Kunle swallowed hard. His voice shook slightly. "I want to escape this life. I want money, real money. I want to be like your customers. I want to change my story." Chief Olowu studied him for a long moment. Kunle continued, "Please teach me. Show me the way out of poverty." That single request changed everything that happened afterward. But at that time, Kunle had no idea what path he had opened and what price he would later pay.
The night Kunle finally reached his breaking point was the night Lagos felt unusually quiet. Even the distant horns from the expressway sounded softer, as if the whole city was holding its breath. Kunle had left Ladipo Market after closing and taken a long, uncomfortable ride to Chief Olowu's mansion in Ikeja, GRA, a place he had only seen from far away. He knew he was crossing a line, but desperation pushed him forward like a force he couldn't fight. The gate of the mansion was as tall as a small building. The guard knew Kunle from the shop and let him in with a confused look. The compound was wide, paved with smooth tiles that reflected the warm glow of outdoor lights. Expensive cars, black SUVs, a new sedan, a silver coupe were neatly arranged like a private exhibition. Kunle's heart beat fast. This was everything he had ever wanted: wealth, freedom, power, a life without fear of tomorrow. He walked to the front door and asked to see Chief Olowu. A few minutes later, the man appeared, calm, well-dressed, holding a glass of juice. He was surprised to see Kunle at such an hour of night. "Kunle, why are you here by this time of night? Did something happen?" Kunle did not answer immediately. His throat tightened, his nerves buzzed. Then suddenly, as if something inside him cracked open,
he dropped to his knees right there on the polished floor of the mansion's entrance. "Chief, please," he said with a trembling voice. "Help me. I want to change my life. I want money. I want to escape this suffering. Show me the way." Chief Oluwu stared at him in complete shock. "Kunle, get up. Don't kneel." But Kunle shook his head. His eyes burned with desperation. "I am begging you. Please, I am ready for anything. I cannot live like this anymore." Chief Oluwu took a step back, rubbing his forehead. "Do you even understand what you are asking? Where did this sudden courage come from?" Kunle swallowed hard. "I have no parents to help me, no land, no business. I am tired of living from hand to mouth. Chief, you are a rich man. You know things. You know people. You live the life I want. Please, teach me. Take me to whoever helped you." Chief Oluwu's face changed slowly, first confusion, then concern, then something darker. He set his drink down and walked closer. "Kunle," he said softly, "there are different kinds of wealth in this world. Some come from hard work, some come from opportunities, but some paths—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Some paths cannot be reversed once taken." Kunle raised his head. "I don't care." "You should care," Chief said firmly. "You are young. You don't know the dangers." Kunle looked up, eyes shining with intensity. "I am ready to risk anything." Silence hung in the air. Behind the chief's calm expression was hesitation, deep, heavy hesitation. He had seen desperate men before. He had seen them rise. He had also seen many fall. He understood that desperation created blindness, and blindness created obedience. He knew Kunle was not pretending. This young man meant every word. And perhaps that is why Chief Oluwu sighed deeply, stepped away, and finally said, "If I take you where you think you want to go, your life will never remain the same." Kunle nodded. "That is what I want." The chief looked at him for a long moment, as though studying his soul. Then he gave a slow nod. "Fine," he said quietly. "Get up. I will take you somewhere tomorrow night. But understand this, Kunle. Once you follow me into that place, there will be no turning back. No regrets allowed, no fear allowed, and no second chance." Kunle stood, shaky but determined. "I accept everything." Chief Oluwu watched him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "You think you know what you want, but when you see what real wealth demands, you may ask yourself if poverty was truly the worst thing in your life." But Kunle didn't look away. "I am ready, Chief." Another long silence. Finally, Chief Oluwu nodded again, slowly, reluctantly, almost painfully. "Then prepare yourself," he said, "because tomorrow night, your journey begins." As Kunle left the mansion and walked into the darkness, he felt a strange chill crawl through his chest. He mistook it for excitement. But it was something else. Something waiting. Something that would shape everything that happened afterward.
The next night came with a heavy sky over Lagos, the kind that hid the moon and made the streets look deeper than usual. Kunle waited outside Chief Olowu's mansion as instructed. When the gate finally opened, the chief stepped out dressed in dark clothing, not his usual colorful outfits, not his expensive perfumes, just plain, simple fabric and a serious face. "Follow me," he said quietly. Kunle obeyed. They drove in silence through the quiet areas of Ikeja and then toward the outskirts of town. Kunle felt both fear and excitement twisting inside him. Every streetlight they passed felt like another step away from his old life. Eventually,
The car turned into a narrow compound with an old bungalow that looked abandoned from the outside. The paint had faded, the windows were dusty, the entire place seemed forgotten. But Chief Olowu parked the car and stepped out. "This is where you want to come?" Kunle asked carefully. Chief nodded. "This is where many dreams begin, and where many end." Kunle didn't understand. He only knew he was ready. Inside the bungalow, the air was thick and quiet. They walked past 2 empty rooms until Chief Olowu stopped before a wooden door. He knocked twice. A soft voice answered from within. "Enter." The moment the door opened, Kunle felt something shift around him, not physically, but in the atmosphere. The room was dimly lit, lined with shelves holding jars, books, wooden carvings, and old objects he didn't recognize. A single lamp glowed at the center, casting shadows that moved like quiet whispers. Sitting on a low stool was Babatunde, an elderly man with calm, observant eyes. His presence filled the room without him speaking. He was known among the wealthy, whispered about but rarely seen. Kunle had only heard rumors that the richest men visited him at night, that he knew paths ordinary people could never understand. Babatunde looked up slowly. "So, you are the young man who wishes to change his destiny." Kunle bowed his head. "Yes, sir." Chief spoke softly. "He came willingly." Babatunde nodded. "Good. Willingness is the first key." Kunle swallowed. His hands trembled slightly. "Chief told me you can show me the path to wealth." "I can, but every path has a price, and once taken, you cannot return to who you used to be." Kunle hesitated only for a heartbeat. "I accept." Babatunde studied him carefully, as though measuring something inside him. "Many men come here wanting riches. Few understand what they are asking for. Wealth is not a free gift. It requires carrying a burden, sometimes in the body, sometimes in the mind." Kunle listened, his heartbeat quickening. Babatunde continued, his voice low but steady. "There is a path, an old one, taken by some elites. A path where the body is marked, and from that mark something unusual begins to appear, something that must be kept secret, something that must be used in a very specific way." Kunle's breathing slowed. He didn't speak. "It is not painful, but it is permanent. The mark becomes part of you, and over time, from that mark, something will be produced, something that must be given in secret to certain animals. When done properly, those animals thrive unnaturally. They grow fast, they grow perfect, and from that perfection, your wealth grows." Kunle felt chills crawl across his skin. "So, the growth of the animals brings riches?" "Yes," Babatunde replied. "But understand this. The mark links your fortune to what you feed. If you misuse it, everything collapses. If you reveal it, it ends. And if you fail to maintain the process, the mark may turn against its owner." Kunle's voice shook slightly. "What happens to the people who choose this path?" "Most of them become wealthy, but all of them carry the mark for life." Chief Olowu cleared his throat, looking at Kunle with concern. "I warned you, Kunle, this is not something you try and walk away from." But Kunle was already drowning in the idea of wealth, real wealth, the kind he had begged for. His mind saw only the future he wanted: money, respect, freedom. He stepped forward. "I agree. I will do it." Babatunde nodded slowly, as though expecting that answer. Then sit, he said. Kunle sat on the low stool in front of him. Babatunde opened a small wooden box beside him and took out a narrow object wrapped in cloth. Kunle did not look closely. He didn't want to know the details, but he felt a strange warmth rise around him. Babatunde rested a hand on Kunle's leg, closing his eyes for a moment as though sending a silent message into the room. This mark will open a door for you, but you must care for it, keep it hidden, and never misuse what it produces. Kunle nodded nervously but determined. Babatunde placed the wrapped object gently against Kunle's right thigh. The room grew quiet. Kunle held his breath. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a strange sensation ran through his leg, not painful, but deeply unfamiliar. His skin tightened, then loosened, then warmed, as though the room itself breathed into him. Babatunde lifted the object, rewrapped it, and returned it to the box. "It is done," he said. Kunle looked down, unsure of what had changed. He saw nothing unusual, but he felt something. Something silent, something waiting beneath the surface. Babatunde leaned closer. "From today, your wealth depends on what comes from that mark. Do not fear it, but do not disrespect what it produces." Chief Olowu sighed with a mix of relief and worry. Kunle stood slowly, feeling the weight of his decision settle into his bones. He had asked for a new life, and now he had entered a world he could not walk away from.
Kunle felt the air in Babatunde's shrine tighten around him, thick, heavy, almost like it was waiting to witness a secret. The candles flickered, their flames dancing like restless spirits. The walls glowed gold from the lantern light, and the scent of old herbs filled the air. Babatunde stepped forward slowly, his footsteps echoing like distant drums. "Are you ready?" he asked. Kunle wanted to say no. He wanted to say he was scared. He wanted to step outside, take a deep breath of the cool Lagos night, and run home to forget all of this. But he couldn't. He had already made his choice long before he entered the shrine. He needed wealth. He needed a breakthrough. He needed to stop being seen as the failure of his family. So he lifted his chin. "I am ready, Baba." Babatunde nodded, slow, solemn, knowing what was coming. The ritual began. A soft chant filled the room, rising and falling like waves. The wind suddenly blew inside, even though the windows were shut. Kunle's heartbeat thumped loudly in his ears. Then Babatunde touched his shoulder lightly and whispered, "This will open the door to fast money, but the door has a price. Your wound will start today. It will grow with your wealth. It will never disappear. And one day, the pain will demand payment. Do you still accept?" Kunle swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. His hands trembled. But he nodded. "Yes, I accept." In that moment, everything changed. A sharp, burning sensation shot through his skin, quick but powerful. Kunle gasped and staggered back. It felt like something invisible had touched him deep beneath the flesh, leaving a mark no ordinary eye could see. He screamed, not from blood, not from injury, but from a sting that felt spiritual, like a flame placed inside his soul. Still, even in the pain, one thought stayed clear in his mind. Do not back out. Do not look weak. Do not fear the path you chose. His scream echoed across the room, bouncing off the shrine walls. Then slowly, slowly, it faded. Babatunde's voice cut through the silence.
It is done. The wound has begun. Kunle breathed heavily, sweat dripping down his face. He felt different, like something had been unlocked inside him. His mind raced with fear and excitement all at once. From today, money will come to you like water flowing downhill. But remember, every coin will increase the pain of the wound. Wealth will rise, pain will follow. Do not forget this. Kunle's chest tightened, but he forced a smile. Let the money come. I can handle anything. Babatunde watched him with pity in his eyes. People always say that in the beginning. Kunle stood up slowly, still feeling the burning sensation deep inside. But when he stepped outside the shrine and saw the city lights glowing like diamonds across the night sky, a wave of excitement washed over him. He could almost smell the riches coming. He chose money over fear, and the wound, silent and invisible, chose him. This was the beginning not of wealth, but of trouble, disguised as blessings.
Kunle woke up the next morning with a strange sensation still pulsing beneath his skin. The wound wasn't visible, but it sat there, quiet, warm and alive, like something that had decided to grow with him. As he stared at the early Lagos sunrise from his window in Ojota, his phone buzzed. It was Chief Olowu, a powerful businessman, a man whose presence alone commanded respect, and one of the few people Kunle trusted enough to confide in. Kunle, come to the office now. We need to talk. Kunle dressed quickly and took a cab to Victoria Island. The luxury district was waking up slowly. Polished cars gliding across the road, workers in clean suits, cafes opening with the aroma of expensive coffee drifting out. It felt like a different world from the shrine he had visited the night before. Inside his office, Chief Olowu didn't waste time. He removed his glasses, stared at Kunle with sharp eyes and said, "My boy, you have stepped into something serious. I can see it on your face." Kunle stiffened. "Chief, I am ready for success, whatever it takes." Chief Olowu shook his head gently. "Success is not the problem. Staying alive long enough to enjoy it, now that is the challenge." He leaned forward. "Leave Lagos immediately. Wealth grows faster when eyes are not watching. Start fresh somewhere else. A place with everyday demand. A business where people must buy. Daily. Food. When stomach calls, even the rich answer." Kunle frowned. "Chief, you want me to run?" "Not run. Strategize. Rich men move quietly. Go to Port Harcourt. Start something simple but steady. Let your money multiply where nobody knows your name." Kunle inhaled deeply. Port Harcourt. A new life. A new identity. A new beginning. And with the wound beneath his skin whispering its strange heat, he felt destiny pushing him forward.
2 days later, Kunle left Lagos with only a backpack, a small box of clothes, and the money Chief Olowo loaned to help him start life. The flight to Port Harcourt was smooth, the sky bright, the clouds soft like floating cotton. Kunle stared out the window, imagining his new wealth rising on the horizon. If this wound was the price, then let the money come. Port Harcourt met him with warm humidity, bustling streets, and the smell of grilled food everywhere he turned. The city buzzed differently, less shine than Lagos, but more hunger. People moved quickly, eyes focused, pockets tight, stomachs noisy. Chief's words echoed. Start a business where people eat daily.
Kunle walked around Mile 1 Market for hours, observing food stalls, smoked fish, roasted plantain, freshly fried yam. But one smell kept pulling him: roasted chicken. The aroma was rich, warm, and unforgettable. People lined up for it, no matter the time of day. That was it. That was the business. With the little money he had, Kunle bought a small wooden stand near the busy road. It was nothing fancy, just a table, a grill, and a colorful umbrella, but it was enough for a beginning. He wiped the sweat off his face, tied a clean apron around his waist, and whispered, "From here, my wealth begins." The wound beneath his skin pulsed again, slow, painful, but strangely encouraging. Kunle lit the grill. Smoke rose, oil sizzled. People turned their heads, and the smell of roasted chicken began to drift across Port Harcourt. A new life had officially begun.
Kunle closed his stand early that evening. He pretended to be tired, but the truth was different. His heart had been pounding since afternoon. The Port Harcourt sky was already darkening, painted with shades of deep navy blue and quiet gold from the last trace of sunset. Market noise slowly faded as sellers packed their goods and customers hurried home. Kunle kept glancing left and right, making sure no one noticed him. He waited until Mama Enena, who sold vegetables beside him, finally locked her stall and left. He waited again until the street boys who normally lingered around the markets drifted away. Only when the entire walkway felt empty did he exhale shakily. Tonight was the night Babatunde had warned him about. "Feed them only in the dark," the old man's voice echoed in his mind. "Feed them with what comes from the wound. Wealth obeys secrecy." Kunle stepped behind his wooden stand. His hands trembled as he lifted the metal drum containing the chickens he purchased earlier. They were small, ordinary birds, nothing special. But tonight, they would become something else. Something unnatural. He locked the stand from the inside and hung a faded curtain to block the view. Now hidden from the world, the air felt tighter. He slowly lifted his trouser leg. The wound pulsed beneath his skin, hot, throbbing, alive. It wasn't bleeding, not exactly, but when he pressed it gently, a small, thick drop of warm substance formed on the surface. It wasn't like anything he had seen before. Not blood, not water. Something in between. He swallowed hard. Babatunde's words came back. "Do not fear it. It belongs to you now. It is your sacrifice and your blessing." Kunle closed his eyes and squeezed the wound again. A little more of the strange liquid surfaced. He quickly collected it with a wooden spoon, praying silently that nobody would walk past his stand and hear him breathing so fast. When he opened the drum, the chickens fluttered weakly. He dipped the spoon and allowed a tiny drop to fall into their feed. Just one drop. That was all Babatunde instructed. The reaction was immediate. The chickens jerked once, then became unusually calm. Their feathers seemed to settle in strange patterns. Their breathing slowed. Kunle stepped back in fear, gripping the side of the table to steady himself. A warm gust of wind passed through the small stand. Even though everything was closed, the wooden curtain swayed as if touched by an invisible hand. Kunle's heart raced. Please work. Let this work. He finished feeding them, covered the drum tightly, and forced himself to sit on his stool. The wound on his leg burned, not painfully, but deeply, as if it wanted him to know that the process had begun. Hours passed. The market was silent now. Port Harcourt lay still under the night. When Kunle finally opened the drum again, he gasped loudly and covered his mouth. The chickens had doubled in size. Their feathers shone like polished gold in the dim lantern light. Their bodies looked soft and heavy, as if they had been growing for months instead of hours. Kunle reached out and touched one. It felt tender, too tender,
unnatural, exactly as Babatunde promised. A slow smile crept onto Kunle's face, though his hands still trembled.
The next morning, Kunle brought out the chickens to roast. Their size shocked passers-by. People stopped immediately. "Is this really chicken?" one man asked, staring with wide eyes. Another woman whispered, "But how did it become this big? It looks like 2 chickens in one." Before long, a crowd formed. People argued playfully, pointing at the massive chicken turning on the grill. Even sellers who normally ignored Kunle found themselves drifting closer. "Give me 1. No, give me 2. Kunle, what kind of feeding are you doing?" Kunle only smiled, acting clueless. He roasted and sold until his hands shook from exhaustion. That day alone, he earned more than he used to make in 2 weeks. And as customers kept returning with excitement in their eyes, Kunle realized something. He had stepped into a level of wealth he never imagined. But deep inside his leg, the wound throbbed again, stronger, hotter, almost as if it was reminding him the price had only begun.
By the time the 3rd week had passed in Port Harcourt, Kunle was no longer just a small man with a wooden stand. He had become a sensation. The aroma of his roasted chicken stretched far beyond the market streets, whispering its way into every corner of the city. People from Owerri, Enugu, and Asaba traveled hours just to taste it. They came in taxis, buses, and private cars, their eyes wide with curiosity and hunger. A small crowd followed him every morning, even before he lit the grill. Children tugged at their mothers' sleeves, and businessmen left their offices early, murmuring that nothing could replace the first bite of Kunle's chicken. Even street vendors stopped to watch, mouths watering and envy simmering in their eyes. Newspapers caught wind of it. The Port Harcourt Daily ran a story on the mysterious chicken seller who turns ordinary birds into gold. A radio station interviewed him, though Kunle cleverly dodged personal questions, giving polite smiles and vague answers. He never revealed the secret behind the growth of his chickens. That secret stayed locked beneath his skin, pulsing and throbbing with every step he took. With his earnings, Kunle began to transform his life. He bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, far from the prying eyes of market gossip. It had a small yard in the back, where he could tend to his chickens in private, just as Babatunde had instructed. Next came a new car, a sleek black sedan that gleamed in the sun. He hired 2 young boys, Obina and Chijioke, to help him at the stand. They carried trays, cleaned the grill, and sold chicken to customers under Kunle's careful supervision. To them, he was simply a hard-working man with a rare gift. To everyone else, he was a miracle in flesh and feathers. But beneath the glory and the laughter, Kunle's right leg throbbed constantly. The wound pulsed deeper now, spreading slightly above his calf, tugging at his thigh. Some nights, the pain was sharp, burning from the inside out. He began to limp slightly, trying to hide it from customers, but it was becoming impossible to ignore. Yet, he pushed through, reminding himself that every stab, every pulse, every secret burn was part of the price for the life he had always dreamed of. He could feel the wound reacting when he worked the grill, when he sold chicken, when he counted the coins in his pocket. It was a constant companion, a silent reminder that wealth did not come without a cost. Despite the pain, Kunle smiled every day, greeting customers warmly and making jokes. He laughed loudly, a sound that carried like a drum across the market square, masking the quiet agony beneath. To the outside world, he was blessed, fortunate, untouchable. But every night, when the market emptied and his assistants left for home, Kunle returned to his secret ritual.
He loosened the cloth over his leg, feeling the heat and pressure from the wound. The small, invisible price of his success was growing heavier, more demanding, and more alive than ever. The city knew him as Kunle, the chicken miracle, but Kunle knew something else entirely. The fortune he held in his hands came from a power he could never truly control. And even as his fame reached its peak, the wound whispered, "It will not stop here. Your wealth grows, but so does your debt." Kunle woke up to a sharp, burning pain in his right leg. The sunlight filtering through the window did little to ease the discomfort. Every morning he found himself drenched in sweat, as if he had run through the humid streets of Port Harcourt in the dead of night. The wound beneath his skin throbbed like a living drum, sending fiery pulses up his calf and tugging at his thigh. Each step felt heavier than the last. Dressing, walking to the kitchen, even standing, everything became a labor of endurance. Kunle's limp had grown pronounced. Customers began to notice, some exchanging concerned glances, but no one dared question the man whose chickens had become a city legend. He forced himself to move. The market depended on him, the chickens depended on him, and, most importantly, the wealth depended on him. The strange ritual Babatunde had taught him could not be skipped. If the chickens were not fed with what came from the wound, their unnatural growth would cease, and with it, the flow of money would dry. By late morning, Kunle's body felt like it carried 100 invisible weights. The sweat poured down his face as he turned the chickens on the grill, his hands trembling slightly. Each time he touched the meat, a sharp stab reminded him of the wound beneath. The pain had become a constant companion, almost like a shadow clinging to him, growing heavier with every success. His assistants, Obina and Chijoke, noticed the change. Obina whispered once, "Boss, maybe you should see a doctor. That leg." Kunle waved him off, forcing a smile. "I am fine, just tired from early work." But inside, he knew the truth. He was no longer fine. His health was declining, yet he could not stop. The chickens could not stop. The cycle had become a chain that bound him. That night, after the market emptied and the streets grew quiet, Kunle returned home. He locked the doors and pulled the heavy curtain over his chicken pen, hiding it from view. With trembling hands, he loosened the cloth around his leg. The wound was worse. It had grown deeper, its edges darkening, almost blackened. The pain burned like molten fire, yet he had to continue. He collected the strange, thick substance that had become the source of his fortune and poured it into the chicken feed. The birds, as always, reacted instantly, their bodies growing fat and soft, their feathers shining in the dim lantern light. Kunle slumped onto his mat afterward, sweat soaking his back, muscles trembling. Every inch of him ached. He whispered to himself in the dark, "This is the price of wealth. I cannot stop now, not yet." Outside, the market slept. Inside, the wound pulsed, alive, demanding. The chickens would not wait. The money would not wait. And Kunle had no choice but to obey. The cycle continued, silently, steadily, and painfully, as if Port Harcourt itself held its breath, watching the man whose fortune had come at a cost that would never end. Obina and Jijioke had been working with Kunle for several weeks now, and at first they had admired their boss. He was hard-working, generous with small advice, and always smiling despite the long hours at the market. But lately, something had changed. Something in the nights made their stomachs twist and their curiosity grow. It began with the strange noises that escaped Kunle's room late in the evening. The two boys would hear soft thuds, whispers, and sometimes a low, almost guttural murmur that made their hair stand on end. Kunle would always emerge in the morning looking pale, sweaty, and exhausted, his right leg carefully hidden beneath loose trousers. Then came the blood. One night, Jijioke had gone to fetch a broom to sweep the backyard when he noticed a dark, sticky stain on the wooden floor beneath Kunle's small stool. At first, he thought a chicken might have injured itself, but the pattern of the stain was strange, too thick, too deliberate. The blood trailed slightly toward Kunle's locked room, and it was enough to make him step back with a shiver. Obina had noticed other things too. Every night, Kunle would lock his room and remain there for hours. The boys heard him moving around, sometimes speaking to himself, sometimes letting out short gasps as though in pain. The smell that occasionally seeped under the door was strange, sour and heavy, almost metallic, different from the usual smell of roasted chicken. It made their stomachs churn. Finally, one night, after the market had gone silent and Kunle had gone inside, the two boys whispered to each other. "Obina, do you see this?" Jijioke said, pointing to the locked door. "He's not just resting. Something happens in there. I think I saw blood on the mat earlier." Obina nodded, swallowing hard. "I've noticed it too. And the way the chickens behave after he comes back, they're too different. Big, fat, soft. It's not natural." The boys felt a cold weight settle in their chests. They had been told to respect Kunle, to follow instructions, and to focus on selling the chickens. But now doubt crept in. What was their boss hiding? The next day at the market, they watched him closely. Kunle laughed, joked, and served customers with his usual charm. The chickens remained perfect, growing even plumper under his care. Money flowed faster than ever. Obina whispered to Jijioke, "He suffers, doesn't he? But he pushes through. Why? Where does this come from?" Jijioke shook his head. "I don't know, but something tells me we shouldn't pry too closely. Whatever it is, it's not normal." Still, the curiosity was there, gnawing at their minds. Night after night, they watched Kunle retreat to his room, clutching his leg, sweating, and speaking to no one. Every morning, he emerged pale, limping more, yet smiling as if the world could not see the pain and secrecy underneath. By now, the assistants understood one thing clearly. The fortune they helped create came at a terrifying cost, and the cost had a face, a smell, and a rhythm they could feel even from outside the locked door. And yet neither dared ask Kunle directly. The silence was thick, as heavy as the humid night air in Port Harcourt, and the unknown truth lingered in the room, waiting to reveal itself when it chose. Mama Kimi had never been one to ignore a mystery. Ever since Kunle's roasted chicken began attracting crowds from Port Harcourt to Enugu, she had felt a gnawing curiosity and a growing jealousy. Her own chicken stall, once busy, had been reduced to a few loyal customers who no longer cared for her slightly dry birds when Kunle's were soft, juicy, and irresistible. The market had quieted one evening, leaving the stalls dim and almost deserted. Mama Kemi crouched behind her wooden counter, her eyes fixed on Kunle's stand. She waited, hidden in the shadows, listening to the faint hum of the cooling evening breeze and the distant chatter of late customers leaving. Her heart raced as Kunle appeared, moving slowly and limping heavily. He carried a small bucket, but his movements were peculiar. He bent, almost crouched, weaving between the chicken cages with careful precision. His right leg throbbed visibly. a limp that no customer had noticed during the day, and his face twisted slightly as though fighting a secret agony. Mama Kemi swallowed hard, her mind whirling. "What is he doing?" she whispered under her breath. She watched him pause, reach behind the cages, and carefully handle something small, something she could not yet identify. The strange, sour smell that seemed to follow him in the daytime now hit her in full force. It was heavy and almost metallic, mixing with the faint odor of chicken and smoke. Her curiosity was stronger than fear. She inched closer, pressing herself behind the stall, heart pounding like a drum. She saw Kunle bend and scoop something into a small container. He worked silently, methodically, as though this was the most important task of his life. Mama Kemi shivered. The sight terrified her, but she could not look away. Questions rushed through her mind faster than answers could form. Is he sick? Is this some secret feeding ritual? Could it be witchcraft? The rational part of her mind told her to leave, to forget it, and return to her own stall, but the greedy, curious part of her would not relent. Night after night she returned. Each evening she watched Kunle limp and bend behind his cages. Each night the smell grew stronger, richer, and more disturbing. Each night her fear mingled with fascination, a dangerous cocktail that kept her rooted in shadows. "Something is hidden there," she muttered to herself one night, her breath catching. "I must know what it is. Whatever it is, it makes his chickens perfect. It makes him rich, and it cannot be natural." Her obsession grew quietly, invisibly, like a fire that smolders before it erupts. Mama Kemi began to plan, considering ways to discover Kunle's secret without being seen. She did not yet know the horrific truth about the source of his wealth, but her curiosity had already taken a dangerous hold. The market slept, but Kunle's compound was alive with strange activity. Behind locked doors and shadowed chicken cages, a cycle of pain and power continued. And just beyond the gate, Mama Kemi waited, watching, plotting, and trembling, unaware that some secrets were meant to stay buried, because unearthing them might destroy anyone foolish enough to try.
The morning air in Port Harcourt carried a crisp edge that made the smoke from Kunle's grill curl lazily into the sky. Customers had begun arriving, carrying baskets and handbags, all eager for the soft, juicy chicken that had made Kunle a household name. But today, Kunle's attention was divided. His leg throbbed relentlessly, the wound beneath the skin sending stabbing, fiery pulses up his calf and thigh. Every step to the market felt like climbing a mountain. As he set the coals and arranged the chickens, a sleek black car slowed near the entrance of the market. Its polished surface gleamed in the sun, drawing glances from nearby sellers. The car door opened, and out stepped Chief Alou, the very man who had once taken Kunle under his wing in Lagos, the powerful dealer who had shown him the path to wealth, though at an unimaginable cost. Kunle's chest tightened. Chief Alou's presence carried authority, wealth, and a silent warning. He walked toward Kunle with measured steps, the metallic clink of his wristwatch faintly audible. Kunle bowed slightly, a mixture of respect and apprehension crossing his features. "You've done well," Chief Alou began, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Your chickens, your business, the people talk even in Lagos. You have succeeded beyond what I expected." Kunle forced a smile, adjusting the apron around his waist. "Thank you, Chief. I've worked hard." Chief Alou's eyes narrowed as they drifted to Kunle's right leg. The limp was more pronounced now, and the man's usual energy seemed strained. "I can see the cost of that hard work. The wound, it grows worse, doesn't it?"
Kunle's throat tightened. "It is fine, Chief. I manage." He tried to force a laugh, though it came out thin and strained. Chief Olowu shook his head slowly. "Kunle, listen to me. You've built something extraordinary, but the price you pay is becoming too great. If you continue at this pace, if you continue to feed the chickens from the wound, there will come a point. Your body will not hold." The word struck Kunle like a blow. Yet, in his chest, greed flared brighter than fear. The thought of more money, more wealth, more recognition drowned the caution in his mind. "I appreciate your concern, Chief, but I cannot slow down. The market demands it. The people, they need my chicken, and I need more." Chief Olowu's lips tightened. "Kunle, the wound is not just pain. It is a warning. You can choose to respect it, to slow down and let your body recover, or you can ignore it. But know this, if you ignore it, the cost will not be wealth alone." Kunle swallowed, gripping the edge of the stall. He thought of the coins spilling into his bag, the long queues of hungry customers, the admiration and envy of neighboring sellers. He thought of Mama Kemi peering from the shadows, wondering at his secret, and the assistants, Michael and Tunde, who now suspected something unspeakable. I cannot stop," he said finally. "I will endure the pain. The money, the fortune, it is worth more than comfort, Chief. I am ready to pay the price." Chief Olowu studied him, eyes dark, unreadable. "You will have the wealth, Kunle, but remember this. Some prices are heavier than gold. Some debts, even I cannot pay for you. Be careful, young man. The path you walk grows darker by the day." With that, Chief Olowu turned, the polished leather shoes clicking on the market stones, and left as quietly as he had arrived. Kunle watched him go, a mixture of determination and unease settling in his chest. He limped back to his chickens, adjusting the coals and turning the birds with practiced hands. Pain stabbed his leg, sharper now than ever, but he ignored it. The hunger for more money, more recognition, more power burned hotter than any wound could. And somewhere, in the shadows behind the stalls, Mama Kemi's eyes glimmered with curiosity, while the assistants whispered among themselves. The market thrummed with life, but Kunle's secret, and the cost it demanded, was inching ever closer to a breaking point.
The mornings in Port Harcourt had begun to feel heavier for Kunle. The sun rose lazily over the market, yet its light seemed sharper, almost unforgiving, as it glared down on his small stand. The clamor of customers and the clatter of baskets barely registered in his mind anymore. All he could feel was the fire in his leg, an unrelenting throb that spread from his right calf to his thigh, and sometimes even tugged at his lower back. Kunle's right leg had been the source of his wealth, but now it was becoming his torment. Every morning he tied the cloths around the wound with trembling hands, praying that it would contain the pain. But even the tightest wrap could not hold the agony that surged through him like hot iron. Sweat streamed down his face as he tried to step toward the grill, and yet, when customers arrived, he forced himself to smile, just as he had always done. The chickens remained unnaturally perfect. Fat, soft, and tender, they pecked noisily at the feed he provided, oblivious to the secret that nourished their growth. Travelers from Owerri, Enugu, and even as far as Lagos came specifically for his roasted birds, whispering to each other about the miracle of his poultry. Kunle's fame had reached heights that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. But behind the grill, behind the laughter and the aroma of spice and firewood, Kunle's body was betraying him.
Each step toward the coals felt like dragging molten metal up a hill. Each turn of the chickens sent waves of pain up his spine. His assistants, Michael and Tunde, had started to notice the grimace he could no longer hide, but Kunle waved them off, hiding the truth behind a mask of composure. By mid-afternoon, the pain had spread further. It pulsed in his belly, crawled along his arms, and lodged behind his shoulders. Sitting or standing made no difference. The wound beneath the cloth had become a living thing, restless and demanding, as if it knew the weight of the fortune it had created. But he could not stop. The chickens demanded feeding, the coals needed tending, and the customers, hungry, impatient, enchanted by the scent, would not forgive weakness. The market thrummed with life, but Kunle felt trapped in his own body, each heartbeat synchronized with the wound's relentless throb. He leaned against the stall, gasping for breath, listening to the distant chatter and the laughter of satisfied customers. Every coin that jingled in the money bag beside him felt heavier than the last. The wealth he had dreamed of, the riches that seemed impossible in the crowded streets of Lagos, now weighed him down like a leaden chain. At home, the wound waited, throbbing like a second heartbeat. Kunle forced himself to resist untying the cloth, knowing that the moment he did, the pain might become unbearable beyond reason. Nights were longer now, filled with sweat, nightmares, and the constant whisper of Babatunde's words, "Feed the living from it, or it will consume you first." The chickens in the backyard clucked and pecked, unaware of the dark bargain that made them grow so fat and tender. And Kunle, limping heavily, gritting his teeth with each step, realized something chilling. The more he earned, the more the wound demanded, and the less he could escape the cost of his wealth. But even as his body screamed, even as his leg burned with a fire that never cooled, he forced himself forward. He would not stop. The market demanded it. His fortune demanded it. And Kunle, blinded by greed, was determined to endure, no matter how unbearable the pain became.
The morning sun had barely pierced the horizon when Kunle arrived at the market, dragging his right leg as though it weighed more than his body. The familiar scent of spices and firewood mingled with the distant sound of early traders setting up their stalls. Yet today, something felt off. Even the birds seemed to sense it, moving with a strange restlessness in their pen. Customers began to arrive, expecting the usual spectacle of soft, juicy, roasted chicken. But as they approached, their expressions changed. Kunle's face was pale and glistening with sweat, his usual wide smile thin and strained. He shook slightly as he turned the birds, almost forgetting the careful seasoning that had once made him famous. "Are you well, sir?" a man asked hesitantly, holding a small basket. Kunle forced a nod and a smile, hiding the tremor in his hands. I am fine. Just a little heat from the grill," he said, though his voice cracked. The customers exchanged wary glances. Whispers began to ripple through the line. Some thought he was ill. Others wondered if he had been cursed. Mothers tugged at their children's hands. Men lowered their voices as they spoke of the perfect chickens. "They are too perfect," one woman murmured, examining the plump, tender birds. "How can they grow so fast, so soft?" "Maybe it is magic," a young man whispered, half laughing, half afraid. Kunle tried to ignore the chatter, but it pricked at him like 1,000 needles. Every turn of a bird sent a sharp pain up his leg and spine, and his hand shook, causing a piece of chicken to slip from the iron rod. He caught it just in time, but the incident drew the eyes of several customers. A small crowd had begun to form, murmuring in concern. Some old women shook their heads, muttering prayers under their breath.
Even the assistants, Michael and Tunde, exchanged worried glances. They had long suspected something strange about Kunle's operation, but seeing him falter in front of paying customers made the suspicion almost tangible. The rumors began to spread like wildfire. By midday, several traders from neighboring stalls had heard the whispers. Some said Kunle was seriously ill. Others hinted that the chickens were produced unnaturally, that the perfection of the meat was unnatural, almost sinister. Kunle, feeling the weight of both the pain and the growing suspicion, clenched his teeth. He forced himself to smile at the next customer, carefully taking coins and handing over the roasted birds. Every step hurt, every motion demanded concentration, but he refused to let them see weakness. His fortune depended on continuing, even as his body threatened to betray him. Behind the laughter and the bustling market, Kunle's leg throbbed violently. The wound beneath the cloth had grown restless again, sending waves of fire through his body. He ignored it, hiding the grimace and the sweat, even as the world around him began to notice that the once invincible chicken seller was now vulnerable and possibly in grave danger.
The market awoke with the usual clamor. Traders shouting prices, children darting between stalls, the aroma of freshly roasted meat and baked bread drifting through the air. But when early customers approached Kunle's usual spot, a strange sight froze them in place. The firewood under the iron grill lay cold and untouched. Smoke, which had always curled into the sky like a familiar invitation, was nowhere to be seen. The chickens, normally plump and ready, were absent from the yard. The stall itself was shut, the wide wooden shutters pulled tight as if no one had lived there for days. A low murmur rose among the crowd. "Where is Kunle?" an old woman whispered, glancing nervously at her basket of vegetables. "He never misses a day." Michael and Tunde arrived moments later, their steps hurried and anxious. The assistants had woken early, ready to start their routine with Kunle, but the absence of their employer left them unsettled. They exchanged worried glances. "Have you seen him?" Tunde asked, voice trembling slightly as he approached the empty stall. "No, I don't know. I came early like always, but there's nothing," Michael replied, scanning the area. His eyes lingered on the cold coals in the darkened yard where chickens usually pecked energetically. "Even the birds are gone. It's like he vanished overnight." The crowd grew larger as word spread. People whispered theories to each other, some practical, some fearful. Perhaps Kunle had fallen ill. Maybe he had traveled for some secret business. But a few older traders, who remembered his strange behavior and the mysterious perfection of his chickens, lowered their voices. Their eyes darted nervously. "Something is not right," one muttered. "This cannot be normal." Neighbors from nearby stalls gathered, curious and worried. Mama Kemi, who had long been obsessed with uncovering Kunle's secret, pushed through the crowd, her face pale with apprehension. She had spent months spying on him, trying to understand how his chickens grew so unnaturally large and tender. Now, with the stall silent and Kunle nowhere to be seen, her obsession turned to fear. Michael and Tunde attempted to look through the shutters, peering into the dim interior of the stall and the small house behind it. Every corner appeared undisturbed, almost too still. No movement, no sign of Kunle, not even a shadow passing the window. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. A few customers, braver than the rest, called out his name. "Kunle, are you here?" Their voices echoed through the empty market space, but there was no answer. Only the distant cluck of some wandering chickens from a neighboring yard broke the silence. The unease in the air was palpable. Traders who had once admired Kunle's skill now felt a gnawing dread. His absence left a vacuum, and the strange quiet seemed almost unnatural, as if the market itself was holding its breath. As the morning passed, more people arrived, drawn by the unusual silence. They whispered among themselves, speculating about illness, theft, or even something far darker. Michael and Tunde tried to reassure the crowd, but their own anxiety betrayed them. Kunle had never missed a market day, not in years. Yet here they were, no smoke, no chicken, no Kunle. Only an empty stall, a cold grill, and the growing suspicion that something terrible had finally overtaken the mysterious chicken seller.
The market had long quieted as the sun began to dip, painting the streets of Port Harcourt in golden orange. But in the neighborhood near Kunle's compound, a new tension hung in the air. A thick, sour smell drifted from the direction of his house, cutting through the usual aroma of grilled meats and spices. It clung stubbornly to the evening breeze, carrying a hint of decay that made people pause in unease. Children who had once raced past Kunle's yard, eager to catch a glimpse of the plump chickens, now stopped short. They covered their noses and whispered to each other, refusing to go near the familiar gate. "It smells strange, like rotten food," one boy said, eyes wide with fear. Neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by curiosity but hesitant to approach. Doors cracked open slowly, and faces peeked out as whispers began to ripple through the street. "Have you noticed that smell?" one woman asked, wrinkling her nose. "It wasn't there this morning. What is happening to him?" Mama Kemi, who had long been obsessed with discovering Kunle's secret, hurried toward the scene. Her heart pounded as she followed the scent to the compound gate. Even at a distance, she could sense something terribly wrong. The air was heavy, thick with a smell that set her teeth on edge. She leaned closer to the gate, scanning the shadowed house, and murmured under her breath, "This is no ordinary illness. Something dark has taken him." The neighbors exchanged anxious glances. A few braver men attempted to approach the gate, but the stench forced them to retreat. The chickens that normally clucked in the backyard were silent now, as if they too sensed the danger inside. Even the loyal dogs of the neighborhood kept their distance, ears pricked and noses twitching. Rumors began to spread like wildfire. Some whispered that Kunle had fallen ill from his own secret experiments. Others, more fearful, suggested he had angered unseen forces, spirits, curses, or powers beyond human understanding. Every story seemed darker than the last, yet none dared enter the compound to confirm. Mama Kemi, driven by a mixture of obsession and fear, moved closer, pressing her hand against the gate. The smell was stronger here, almost suffocating, and she gagged slightly, but she refused to step back. She had waited for this moment for months. Something inside her knew that Kunle's secret was unraveling, and she could not let it slip away now. As the evening shadows deepened, the neighborhood fell into a tense silence. Even the market traders, returning home from closing their stalls, paused to comment on the smell. The wind carried it far and wide, reaching streets that had never known Kunle's fame personally, yet making every passerby uneasy. Inside the compound, Kunle's world had shrunk to the four walls of his house, the wound in his leg burning relentlessly, and the secret that had once brought him unimaginable wealth now beginning to demand a terrifying price. The smell that escaped his home was a warning to all outside, a sign that the bargain he made could not remain hidden much longer. Mama Kemi took a deep breath and stepped back slightly, heart hammering in her chest. She whispered to herself, "I must see what is happening. I must know the truth." The neighbors, sensing her determination, watched quietly, some turning away in fear, others clutching their children, unwilling to confront the darkness emanating from Kunle's compound. The night grew heavier. The smell lingered, thick and oppressive, curling around every corner of the street. And in the silent house behind the locked doors,
Kunle endured the relentless pain of his wound, unaware that the world outside was beginning to notice that the mysterious chicken seller was no longer invincible.
By the following morning, the tension in the neighborhood had become unbearable. The sour, choking smell from Kunle's compound had grown stronger overnight, curling into the alleys and seeping into nearby homes. Children refused to go near the area, and traders avoided the street on their way to the market. Even the bravest neighbors whispered in fear, casting nervous glances toward the silent house. Finally, a group of villagers, drawn together by fear and curiosity, decided they could wait no longer. Among them were Emeka, a young trader who had often competed with Kunle for customers; Sandra, a sharp-eyed woman who sold spices nearby; Adaobi, whose fruit stall always thrived on the same corner as Kunle's chicken; and Mama Kemi, the most determined of all, her obsession with Kunle's secret now outweighing any fear. They approached the compound cautiously. The air was heavy, the smell almost suffocating. The gate creaked as they pushed it open, their eyes watering from the stench. "This is horrible," Adaobi whispered, covering her nose with her scarf. "It wasn't like this yesterday." They reached the front door. Emeka knocked hard, the sound echoing unnaturally in the still air. "Kunle, are you there? Open the door," he called, voice trembling slightly. No answer came, only the oppressive silence of the house. Sandra tried next, banging the wooden panels with her fists. "Kunle, please, it's us!" Still no reply. Mama Kemi stepped forward, her resolve stronger than ever. "We cannot wait any longer," she said firmly. With Emeka and Adaobi's help, she forced the door open. The hinges groaned under the pressure, and the door swung inward, revealing the dim interior. The smell hit them full force, thick and sour, unlike anything they had ever encountered. It clung to their throats, stinging eyes and noses. Each step inside made the smell intensify, growing heavier with every inch they moved toward the center of the house. The room was dark, shadows stretching across walls lined with furniture. They could see overturned chairs and the faint outline of Kunle's belongings, but no sign of him. The assistants, Michael and Tunde, were nowhere to be seen either. The silence was broken only by the faint, irregular scratching from the floor, a sound that made each of them freeze mid-step. Sandra gagged, covering her mouth with her hand. What is that smell? Oh God, I cannot." Her voice faltered as she backed toward the doorway. Mama Kemi, however, moved further inside, eyes wide and unflinching. "This is it. I can feel it. His secret. It's here," she whispered. She glanced at Emeka and Adaobi, whose faces mirrored both horror and fascination. None of them had ever encountered anything like this before. The smell seemed to rise from beneath a tightly wrapped cloth left in a corner of the room. Every instinct in their bodies told them to flee, but curiosity rooted them in place. They could see stains on the floor, dark and sticky, and faint traces of something crawling under the thin mats and furniture. Emeka swallowed hard, trying to keep his courage. "We have to see. We have to know what happened," he said, voice barely audible over the thumping of his heart. Adaobi nodded, and even Sandra, though trembling, inched forward. Mama Kemi stepped forward, her resolve stronger than ever. "We cannot wait any longer," she said firmly. With Emeka and Adaobi's help, she forced the door open. The hinges groaned under the pressure, and the door swung inward, revealing the dim interior. The smell hit them full force, thick and sour, unlike anything they had ever encountered. It clung to their throats, stinging eyes and noses. Each step inside made the smell intensify, growing heavier with every inch they moved toward the center of the house. It was clear now that Kunle had not just disappeared. Something terrible,
unnatural, and alive had been growing inside that house for all these months. The source of his wealth, the secret behind the perfect chickens, was no longer a mystery contained. It had become a horror demanding attention. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of shallow, panicked breathing filled the room. Outside, the market continued as if nothing had happened. But behind the locked doors of Kunle's house, the truth of his secret was finally revealed. The villagers realized in that moment that greed had led not only to fortune, but to a terror they could never have imagined.
The villagers stood at the threshold, their hearts hammering, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. The sour stench from Kunle's house was nearly unbearable, clinging to their clothes and burning their throats. Emeka, Sandra, Adaobi, and Mama Kemi exchanged nervous glances, each silently urging the others to move forward. No one spoke. Every step toward the living room felt like walking into a nightmare. As they entered, their eyes adjusted to the dim light. The room was chaotic. Overturned chairs, scattered feathers, and small stains darkening the floor. But it was the center of the living room that froze them in place. There, on a low mat, lay a thick cloth partially unwrapped. Its edges were darkened, almost burnt, and something moved beneath it. At first, it was subtle, a twitching, wriggling motion. But as they stared, the shapes became more distinct. White, crawling forms slithered and writhed, moving as if alive, linked to the wound Kunle had always hidden. In the kitchen, the smell of the night before still lingered, and their eyes were drawn to the large wooden troughs and feeding bowls. The chickens, normally plump and lively, now stood motionless, pecking nervously at the feed. But the feed itself was different. Something had been added to it, something unnatural that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The villagers understood at once that the perfect chickens, the secret behind Kunle's wealth, and the grotesque movement beneath the cloth were all connected, bound together by the instructions of Baba Tunde. Mama Kemi stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached out to pull back more of the cloth. Emeka grabbed her wrist. "Wait! We don't know what this is," he whispered, his voice shaking. Sandra's face had gone pale, and Adaobi turned away, trying not to witness what their curiosity had brought them to. But Mama Kemi could not stop. She had spent months chasing Kunle's secret, and now it was before her eyes. A low, wet sound came from the cloth. The crawling shapes beneath it seemed endless, sliding and pushing against each other. The villagers could see now that the source of Kunle's wealth was horrifyingly alive. An extension of the wound on his leg fed into the chickens to make them plump and irresistible. It was a grotesque cycle. The wound produced life, the life was fed to the chickens, and the chickens produced profit. Emeka swallowed hard, feeling bile rise in his throat. This is beyond greed," he whispered. It's... Words failed him as the shapes writhed, spreading slightly toward the feeding bowls. Sandra gagged, covering her mouth with her scarf. Adaobi turned away, trying not to witness what their curiosity had brought them to. But Mama Kemi could not stop. She had spent months chasing Kunle's secret, and now it was before her eyes.